Welcome to Trash Talk, a podcast by Zero Waste Canada. I'm your host, Alistair McCallum. I moved to Canada in 2017 from England, and I've since held a variety of roles in the waste industry, and currently sit on the Zero Waste Canada board. On this podcast, we will dive deep into the world of zero waste and the circular economy, speaking with change makers who are helping to lead us to a more waste-free, sustainable planet. On today's Trash Talk, we are joined by Karen Wirsig from Environmental Defence. Okay, Trash Talk is back, and we have Karen here joining us today. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for being here.
You're very welcome. Good to be here.
Thank you. Let's start off with your background. So yeah, kind of what's your background and tell us about yourself.
Well, I've been working to fight plastic pollution for nearly 5 years with Environmental Defence. And in those 5 years, I've learned a lot of things about plastics that I probably didn't really want to know. And of course, I've always been a kind of a zero waste proponent.
Yep.
And I would say that learning about plastics has really, like, the ins and outs of the industry, the ins and outs of how much plastic is in almost everything we buy nowadays, has really reconfirmed my commitment to zero waste, because we really can't keep making and using all this cheap stuff and find a place for it in our world. It won't work.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. Yeah, there's a lot of plastic pollution, and it's impacting the environment. We keep kind of hearing about like regulations coming in, but there's still that kind of issue of consumption and who deals with plastic waste and where does it go, and many different layers to that. Yeah. So yeah, on kind of the kind of pollution piece, a big thing we're seeing in the industry right now is incineration, waste to energy plants increasing. So I'm wondering if you can kind of give an overview of why is that a bad thing? What are the kind of key issues that's leading to, and why is burning waste not a good policy?
Well, just first of all, it's very polluting to burn waste, and it does generate greenhouse gases, and especially it generates greenhouse gases from the burning of plastics, which are just fossil fuels in another form, right? Because almost all plastic is made out of oil, gas, or in some cases coal, not in North America, but in other parts of the world, plastic can also be made out of coal. So plastic is a pollutant, and when you burn it, it's a very dangerous pollutant. So let's start there. Incineration is, and most of our waste is plastic. So
Yeah.
That it really drives a lot of the pollution if we burn our waste. I think the other problem is that people seem to think that incinerators, there's some kind of magic newfangled technology that makes incineration clean, and it just makes the waste disappear. And that's just not true. I mean, first of all, whatever gets burned and turns into gases gets expelled out of the incinerator. Sure, there are filters, but those filters don't catch all the nasty pollutants that come out of those stacks. And so, people who live near incinerators are exposed to some terrible air pollution and persistent pollutants that build up in our food webs and build up in our own bodies. And so really, waste incineration does not get rid of garbage. It just changes its form, right? Then also you're left with ash, and there can be anywhere between 20 and 35% of the original weight of the waste left over in ash. That has to go somewhere. So it's really not a zero waste, even though you sometimes hear companies call their incineration projects zero waste. It's not zero waste. It is absolutely waste management of among the most old-fashioned kind, but somehow it's given this sheen of being kind of high-tech and safe, space-saving, and it's a problem. So I think that's the other, beyond just all the pollution and um, beyond all the pollution that it creates, what it does is it makes us imagine that it's okay to produce all this waste because we have this useful thing to do with it, which is to burn it and maybe create some energy out of it. And I guess that's the third problem, is that it makes us think that there's a virtuous cycle of waste and we can produce energy. But in speaking to lots of advocates around the world against waste incineration, and even hearing one waste incinerator manager speak at a talk, it's really never about energy generation. And in fact, what we know from the Brampton case, Brampton being a city next to Toronto that has a privately owned waste incinerator, they're applying to more than quadruple their capacity, like build a new burner and quadruple the capacity. It would be the biggest waste incinerator in Canada, right in the middle of a populated region, in the middle of an environmental justice community. They've acknowledged that sometimes they can't meet their obligations to Ontario's electricity grid, and they just burn fossil gas when they need to do that. So they're basically another fossil gas plant, energy generation plant. It's not any kind of virtuous waste to energy kind of situation when they're doing that. So really, I mean, my assessment is that when we call these facilities waste to energy facilities, we're contributing really to a greenwashing and a fantasy that somehow burning waste can solve our problems, which it absolutely can. It just makes them worse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, I've seen some trucks, some waste holding trucks in Toronto, that say zero waste through incineration. It kind of blows my mind, like how that's even allowed to be on the truck. Yeah, because I guess a question I have on that is, do you think the public are kind of being directed towards incineration being a good thing based on like yeah, you mentioned space saving and energy consumption. Do you think it's the public opinion is being shifted towards it being positive rather than them being like told about the impacts it can have on them?
I think in general, this is the push, right? Waste incineration companies know, and I mean, the city of Toronto is in the process of doing a waste study right now. They got their long-term planning, updating their long-term plan for waste.
Yeah,
And they acknowledge, like, the one downside of a waste incinerator or planning for waste incineration, it's really hard to cite one because people don't like them in their backyards.
yeah,
But so in fact, to counter that, I think the industry that makes a lot of money out of waste, right? That they haul the waste, they burn the waste, they bury the waste, they export the waste. Like, there's just a lot of money in garbage, right? Um, and so what they do is two things. First of all, they look for communities they think will be less likely to effectively say no and convince their local politicians. So that's why we see these facilities go up in, tend to be in either very low population areas or in places where there's a sense that the community, is busy, is maybe working. They're working people. They're working two jobs. They don't have time to read all the technical data they may not understand, and they don't have the time to speak, make their voices heard and say no. I mean, or they won't be listened to if they try. So
yeah.
I think there's that problem. And then on the overall sort of charm offensive they put on, is they try to make everybody else think that it's okay, keep generating waste, it's no problem, we have a magic solution for it.
Mm.
And so, we'll send it to somebody else's backyard, don't worry. And it'll be out of your hair, and what, it won't be taking up space in a landfill. I think the problem, here's what the industry has done, especially the waste burning industry has really set itself up as the magical solution to landfill. And everybody can see why landfill is a problem. Many people, have grown up around landfills in their communities, right? Every town used to have a dump,
Yeah,
and the city of Toronto had a big dumping area, or many big dumping areas. And then the most recent one that closed, owned by the city, that was not in the city, but adjacent, just north, um, you know, people are, you become aware of the dump. Like you maybe don't want to live near the dump, and
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
and so landfills we're very well familiar with, and we don't really like them. And so if there's a way that we could avoid them, that would be great. And I fully agree with that. Like, I am not saying we should have landfills and not incinerators. This is why I'm a proponent of reducing waste. And there are many, 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 many ways that we can reduce waste and, frankly, save room, the remaining room in existing landfills that are already open and operating, so that we don't need to build more of them, and we don't need to build more waste incineration capacity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, having worked in waste for yeah several years, a lot of people it's more like a case outside and then it's like out of their mind kind of thing. So they have the bins. Once they're emptied, people kind of like maybe don't think about it where it's going as much. But then yeah, behind the scenes, there's like issues of yeah where it's going. There's lack of space. Incinerators yeah help with that obviously, and I think most people generally don't really look into the behind the scenes aspect of where their waste is going. They assume it's being handled properly and it's being treated properly, whatever it may be. Want to come back, you mentioned Brampton. There's a few things in Ontario happening right now, kind of linked to incineration, and that's one of them. So recent things that have happened include Brampton being expanded, City of Toronto waste questionnaire that kind of came out that again was kind of heavily kind of shifting the narrative to incineration. It was fairly biased, let's say, in its structuring. Other things to point out, the weakening of blue box regulations is planned as well, or put in the domain recently, and also a government report on the grid supply and increasing waste to energy in that. And just on that note, yeah, the page it mentioned that on mentioned increasing circular economy, which those two things don't really match up. So there's a few things listed there, but I'm just wondering your opinion, like, yeah, why is Ontario pushing this? Yeah, why is this the kind of narrative they're focusing on? And what do you think the future is going to be? If all these things, yeah, kind of happen and we keep kind of pulling away regulations that are helping circular economy and zero waste. What's the future going to hold if, yeah, all these things, yeah, get put into motion?
Well, we're going to have more waste, and we're going to have more waste in people's faces. I mean, the great thing about plastic, which is awful, but it in terms of, it doesn't lie, right? Like, that Coke bottle, we have a funny poster that we use at demos. Remember me? It's a picture of a Tim Hortons lid. Remember me? I'm your Tim Hortons lid from 1995. Like, plastic pollution is in your face. It's
Mm.
pretty recognizable, even like years after it ends up in nature. If you find something, you're like, oh shoot, there's my Tim Hortons cup lid, or there's somebody's Coke bottle. Like, this stuff is really, so the more and more we have of it, the more it's going to be right in our face, because you can't, there will always be what you call leakage of
Yeah,
waste, right? And if an apple core leaks out, it'll compost, and Bob's your uncle. It becomes a bit of dirt, and there it goes. If your Coke bottle leaks out, it stays a Coke bottle, and it looks like a Coke bottle for probably longer than your lifetime, depending on where it is. So, I mean, the only thing that we can guarantee is that visible plastic waste and pollution will get worse. um Air pollution will get worse, and there will be no brakes put on the kinds of garbage that is literally put on the market as flimsy single-use packaging that is probably not necessary but useful to market a product. uh all these things will continue to grow and add up, and our waste situation will get worse, not better. That there
yeah,
is just no question in my mind. Because we can talk about recycling. I mean, there's one very dangerous thing that the province is now doing, which is to reverse a very good rule that was on the books, which said that recycling does not include, the definition of recycling does not include burning in any way, shape, or form plastic or any other waste.
Yeah.
That's not recycling. That obviously destroys the material for one quick hit of basically fossil based energy from plastic. And that's, I mean, as we said, it's up into the sky, it's in our lungs, it's in our bodies. It's not circular. Like, it's not any kind of it's a vicious circle. It's not like a nice circle that we want to think about. So, the government and some industries are really polluting the whole concept of the circular economy this way. And I
Mm.
think we have to stop talking about it now as an unproblematic thing that is good, because it really, the notion is polluted. It is a vicious circle now.
Yeah.
So we do really have to insist on breaking the cycle. And there are absolutely ways we can do that, as I mentioned before. I mean, Ontario is a good example because we don't even have deposit return programs for those Coke bottles. That's why we see so many of them around, like
Yeah.
water bottles, Coke bottles, all those cans, Diet Coke cans and Canada Dry cans. This is what we see all over our parks, in the rivers, washing up on beaches, the caps from these bottles, and other types of packaging. And if we had a deposit return system, which we were on the path to getting, uh,
Mm.
almost all of that kind of garbage would be collected and taken back for a deposit return, like some kind of money back, and properly sorted so that it could be refilled or recycled. But that's off the table again in Ontario, unless we can collectively get it back on the table. And now our alcohol deposit return system is at risk because beer stores are closing, and they're the only, really the only retailers who are accepting empties. So we're really just headed in a wrong direction on the generation of waste. Those are just two small examples. There should be, I mean, these incinerator companies, or the one in Brampton has said, 75% of the waste that it handles is plastic, paper, metal, or organics like food or garden waste.
Mm.
75%. None
Yeah.
of that stuff belongs in a waste incinerator, right?
Yeah.
So, and the city of Toronto has said that 60% of what's in the garbage bag that Ontario residents throw away shouldn't be in the garbage bag. It's organics that could be composted or recyclables, or hazardous waste that really should never go in the garbage. So, or the regular garbage at least. So basically what we're looking at here is a situation where nobody's doing anything about the stuff that doesn't belong in the garbage bag, except, companies are clamoring to build more facilities to get paid to treat all this stuff. And
Yeah.
we're now getting this idea that, some of this treatment can be called recycling. So we'll make ourselves all feel better about it, maybe, as air emissions, air pollution goes up, for all that stuff that's related to waste. And by the way, this stuff does not create jobs. Like, waste is not a job creator. In a moment now where also we're concerned about jobs in Canada and local jobs, like actually reducing waste and repair, reuse, refurbishment programs would actually help create jobs, and keep these materials in circulation and prevent this strain on our waste systems that requires, or that certainly results in, exports of waste to the United States and to other countries. So like everything we're doing is just absolutely wrong when it comes to the situation we're in, both for the environment and in terms of international trade.
Yeah, some really great points there. Yeah, like personally, I lived in BC and then moved to Ontario last year, so I've seen kind of how these things do work, and then I've come to where they're not working or not in place whatsoever. So I've kind of seen both sides of the coin on that. And you mentioned too, yeah, about zero waste kind of creating jobs, and yeah, like a lot of the narrative right now is on, yeah, tariffs geopolitics and how we need to keep things close to home. And yeah, like I'm reading all these stories on like yeah, incineration and blue box, and I'm like, yeah, well, this is a great time to bring things close to home by being more zero waste, being more circular, like investing in kind of yeah, companies locally to process materials or reuse all those things. Yeah, the drivers like you had mentioned before of economy and jobs. So yeah, there's things that could be done better, let's say. So coming on to yeah, kind of what should be in place rather than incineration. You mentioned a few items already. So what other kind of quick or easy wins could there be that you're seeing that could help us move away from incineration and more to zero waste and circular economy, and that could be yeah, kind of put in place.
Yeah, well, there need we about 60% of the waste generated in Ontario is generated at businesses and by businesses, and all that's really unregulated. Like at least in Ontario, municipal waste and household waste has been held to some diversion targets, and they're those rules have existed. They're going to be weakened now,
Yeah.
some of them, but the rules exist, and the municipalities have taken them seriously to try to divert um, waste from the garbage pail, just discards, let's say, from the garbage pail.
Yeah.
So we have recycling programs, and we also have green bin programs for all residential, for all households, almost in Ontario. The same's not true for businesses. They're not held to any standard. And so they're not going to invest in this, waste sorting and processing of organics if there's a cheap dump somewhere, especially if there's a cheap dump across the border in Michigan or New York State or Ohio. Why would they invest in anything?
Mm.
They'll just contract with a hauler that will take it to the cheapest solution. And so this is this is filling up our landfills here. It's adding, it's making people mad in Michigan. Ontario's waste is going there for good reason. And instead, what these companies should be doing is required to sort their waste and ensure that no organics is going to any kind of disposal, whether that be incinerators or landfills anywhere. And that's also something that the government's not doing. But if you think about it, organics is the heaviest part of our waste, right? Because it's
Yeah.
full of water, and this is water we're transporting around for no good reason. This is the one thing that could change the dynamic very quickly, is to require organics separation and collection and treatment, local organics treatment from businesses across the province would be a
Mm.
huge win. Um, Refill and reuse programs, if we required all of those, like starting the low hanging fruit, and this is something that there's an attempt to get this in Toronto, which already exists in places like Victoria and BC, require restaurants to use reusable dishes and cutlery for dine in. Why are we using garbage when we're sitting in a restaurant that has a dishwasher or should have a dishwasher? I mean, they have cooking implements. Presumably they have to wash things there. And we're
Yeah.
sitting there in their restaurant. Why are we allowed to eat off of garbage? Like it's not right. So that's the low hanging fruit. And then setting up systems for reuse for all kinds of takeaway things and grocery store packaging. Like the province should be, and provinces in general should be, on the forefront of making those things happen. It would be great local job creators. So those are just a couple of things that I can think of off the bat that would really start changing the dynamic. Just to note that packaging and single-use packaging is probably the single biggest driver of actual waste. When you take into account, when you sort of set aside the fact that all the organics are so heavy, what's really driving waste is the packaging.
Mm. Yeah.
And we know packaging even leads to food waste, because sometimes you're having to buy things that, are in a format that's bigger than you need, but there's no other option, or it looks cheaper or whatever else. So really, we know packaging is driving waste.
Yeah. Yeah. Big driver for sure. There's a lot of things that can be done, yeah, differently. You mentioned businesses too, and yeah, having worked yeah, like commercial real estate for a couple of years. There's a lot of money in waste. You mentioned this point earlier as well. Like, there's a lot of money in waste, and I think businesses maybe don't realize sometimes how much money they can save looking at supply chains, looking at their output, and doing things differently. So having like someone in-house with a waste eye can really drive, yeah, good savings. Like for example, if you're producing lots of organic waste and lots of pickups happening in many different bins, you could look at on-site composting, for example. Like Terraformer, who were on a previous podcast, mentioned that, and there's a lot of things, innovations coming out like that that can really help bottom line businesses and doing things differently. The ROI is very strong on those kind of things, and I think, yeah, looking at a business lens, there's potential that isn't realized because, yeah, there's no regulation in some respects on items, and yeah, people don't think of it as much. It's kind of outside, out of mind. But there's opportunity to be had there for increasing diversion, also bringing costs down as well. So it's a win-win. But I think, yeah, like you mentioned, there's no incentive so much really regulation wise, and then it's kind of status quo most of the time. So yeah, opportunities are there that could be tapped into more. Um, Awesome. Yeah. Just going on to our closing message now. Yeah. What would your call to action be for people to get their voices heard on waste to energy or any incineration kind of projects coming up in their areas? What would you, yeah, mention to people to like do to get involved in learning more about this and how they can, yeah, speak to government officials and, get their voices heard more on this?
Yeah, well, if you're in Canada and if you're in Ontario right now, I think it's clear that a waste dump or an incinerator could be coming to your area.
Yeah.
So really, yeah, you can visit our website. We have quite a bit of information about incineration. There are lots of other groups. There may be local groups that work on waste or zero waste. Definitely connect with a group, get some information, and I mean that no project is really that different from any other project. So even if you're learning about something elsewhere, it's probably it's helpful. And make sure your local politicians at every level, provincial, local, like municipal, but also federal. If you're seeing them over the summer at barbecues, make sure that they're thinking about waste and they don't assume that you're just expecting them to get your garbage out of your hair, right? Which is, I think, a lot of politicians think if I just make it easier for my constituents, that's all that matters.
Mm.
I guess what I'm saying is what seems easy is actually very complicated and is taking us down a very bad route. So make sure that that when you're talking to your local politicians, if you see them at barbecues over the summer or whatever, if they come to your door, or call them up and just make sure that they know that zero waste is important to you, and that you expect measures to be taken to reduce the amount of waste we're creating instead of just allowing more and more waste to be created, with the assumption that there's some magical solution that's going to save us from it, which there really is not. And this problem is only going to get worse.
Yeah, there isn't an a way. That's the kind of, yeah, point I think people, yeah, don't see sometimes, and that's the, yeah, the kind of key. There isn't anything, there isn't like a magic solution. Like burning isn't gonna, yeah, remove waste. There's always gonna be waste there. So pursuing zero waste policies and circularity is the only way to really, yeah, like lead to cleaner environments. You mentioned jobs earlier, so benefits all around. So awesome. Thanks for your time today, Karen. Yeah, it's great chatting to you. And yeah, that was Trash Talk.
Good to be here. Thank you.